I just wanted to make a quick video on how I do my styles when creating buttons and just like gradients and things in general. So let's start off with the first button, which is the gray one. Um, I'll grab the colors from this design so then I can just leverage that. Let's create a fixed size, 42 pixels. Um, that already feels like a little dark, so let's work with the gradient here. So B21, I already feel that's going to be slightly too dark, so let's go higher. And then you'll notice I set the darkest color here, and then I just go up like half an inch. Like that's really, really important when it comes to creating gradients. Like they need to be that subtle. So you don't want to range it too far, or else you get um, the colors to be way off. So remember, like here, I'll show you again. Just watch this. It's about half an inch difference. So that's how you get a really subtle gradient effect. Um, so now I still have the darkest color um, in my copy and paste. So I'll just set the stroke equal to that. But then now we want to go darker because that's still a little too light. But it doesn't show too well in this background since they're almost the same color. But that's generally how you want to do strokes. You'll see it better when I do the colored ones. Um, so now we can take the tools and like put them on top. So here the designer chose to use blue. I usually find, I mean, blue works, but I usually find gray to be a better choice when it comes to um, gray buttons. So something like that. And I might go lighter or darker, actually. So something like this usually works pretty well. Um, and then to make it indented, we can just give it a drop shadow. Make sure you turn off global light. A reverse drop shadow. And then turn this to overlay. So now you get that nice um, indented effect. We should probably make this white. Um, so it's not too crazy, but you can still kind of see it. So now we can go and create the other part of the button, which is making sure this has an inner shadow as well, so we can get a nice bubble effect. So we'll do 90 and then turn this to white. It's not going to be that noticeable because of the background color, but you can barely see it. I try to make it as sharp as possible, pushing to 100%. But most buttons, you're not going to make it that um, sharp because it'll be more noticeable. So now we can just group these together and create the active state. So with the active state, we just reverse all the elements on the button. So we'll just reverse the gradient, and then we can reverse the inner shadow. And that's how you get like the push type look. Not as noticeable again on this, but you'll see it much better when we do the pink button, which is right here. So we can start with the circle, and then again get a nice gradient overlay on this. So we'll grab the darkest color that this designer used and work with that. So we start with the darkest and then go to the light setting and go about an inch or less than that above. So now it's like super subtle. Now we can set the stroke to be slightly darker than the darkest part of the gradient. Um, and then we can set the inner shadow, again without the global light, to white and overlay. So you get that effect. Now we can take the add icon, give that color overlay of like white, and then we can apply again this drop shadow effect to go with black. And since it's overlay, it basically works well with the pink. So you can see how it's like slightly indented. So here I would just like mess around with the ranges of this, but it seems like 75% is fine. And then lastly, another cool thing we can do, since this is a dark background, we can add a drop shadow to the button itself. So we can do something like a white drop shadow at 90 degrees. So then, you see how subtle that is? Like it feels like it's inside the paper background. That one's a little too crazy, but the overlay makes it pretty nice. So now we can do the push state. And just reverse the elements. So that's pretty much how you get a nice looking button for both the regular state and push state. So the hover state, all I would do is just keep the color in between, so something around like the darker pink for the entire button. So lastly, let's just do one of these square buttons really quick. So we can start with a rounded rectangle. I think it's good to stay with the rounded rectangle because all the other elements that this designer is using are rounded, so we're just going to stick with that convention. And then again, we can just grab the gradients from the design on the right, starting with the darkest. Make sure you copy this. Let me show you here. And then again, we'll go like an inch or less in terms of the gradient. So it's really, really subtle. Like the user shouldn't really know it's there, but you can like feel it in a sense. So we'll set the stroke again to slightly darker than the darkest color of the gradient, and we'll set an inner shadow of white at 90 degrees. And make sure it's overlay. So see how that's like, it's a little too bright. What we can do is we can just take it down to about 40 or 30%. I think 30 is pretty decent because it's a lot less noticeable. And then lastly, we can add the word explore. Make that white. And then again, we want to give it that indented feel. So we just add a drop shadow. with distance 1, size 1. Um, See how that gives it a more extruded feel? You can give it an inset by just reversing it. And then you also want to do overlay. But see with this, it still looks a little too dark. So what I'll do is I'll just grab the darkest color of blue and then I'll take it down. So then it's more blue shadow rather than black. So it's a lot more subtle. You can notice the theme of this is like make everything subtle as much as you can. Um, so lastly, we can add the uh, squares, which I'm not sure. Oh, there they are, to the top. And then we can duplicate this to make the push state. And the push state again is just reversing the elements. So it looks like it's been pushed. Um, oh yeah, we can also add the drop shadow of white. So it's really subtle. That's probably already too much. Something not too noticeable. And apply it to both of the designs. Oops. And then 50%. But yeah, that's pretty much how you do it. I would do the sliders, but those also take um, just the same techniques when creating them. But yeah, good luck.